delegates dan Riniki Kwaiki in Hina Nashito Tahadeliado Kwaiki it's Zigo Kon di to it's a hegi Naliniki Banda dit into Hashan Kwaiki Lahodo Nito Kwaiki Bitche that need be that need that need a co. And this has been a whole year in effort on our water rights settlement with all the parties. We do have the federal, state, and 2 other tribes and Navajo Nation and all the towns and cities that surround the Navajo Nation who were a part of these discussions for over a year. Jo e ko aiki de kushinache di to bandit on kate achen hol ji ko aiki el khadet to kate el tsko ko aiki en kitbeta hozen do kuichen ko aiki bahan bahante zeto dejo public education de kliniki to in de iho kon honza che hol jish ko aiki ba ketni zen to Jodi Elijah Tohiki Bani Chito Pachan seats di Quagi an Hito le da di nido Quagi Bani Chito Jo di in Halchinato and his hoke bin ye bin nache Quagi Pachan seats on con Nikiman Shidelia. And this is really highlighting the need for and importance of water and throughout the nation, throughout the country, within the southwestern portion, we're experiencing extreme droughts, climate change, and it's very important to start talking about the directions that we need to take to protect our water, secure our water, both groundwater and surface water. And really, this is thinking for our future, thinking for our children and our grandchildren, that we're laying out the foundation as readily as we can for them. Si case quite again, Alchina Halana and Alchina Don Hasoke, Ban si queso, Benache, quite Junoko at the need. And we're driven by the inspiration of our children and grandchildren. I talk as myself as a mother that, in 10, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years, I want my children, grandchildren, our grandchildren, even all the way down to the ones that are not born yet, to be able to have these waters in place and having them protected and having them being able to have these resources that is highly needed within our communities. And many of our families are still hauling water to this day. And those are some of the factors that we really highlighted in fighting for our water rights. And it is time to do so. And many years have passed trying to get to the settlement, but we're nearly at the finish line. And I really commend all of our team that has been a part of these discussions every other day with all the parties. For our Navajo attorneys, our Attorney General, to our Arizona Council delegates, and to our Water Rights Commission, and even with the Department of Water Resources, Mr. Jason John, and there were many stakeholders who were a part of these discussions. And this is the time for all of our community members, all of our citizens to be able to answer questions regarding to community benefits, or what are some of the technical questions, the amount of acre footage of water. This is your opportunity to ask those types of questions. quite is a go what hitch and hasti to leto nana a hehan get a dishni quite get ice not gito a show that at that the holiado con a shawden masana don kitchelo bikita not trado a jota the holiado leto what hitch and hasti to leto nana a hehan. Again, this is Speaker Curley of the 25th Navajo Nation Council, and may you all have a good evening.
Hakushila hehe shide kwadoki ya haneki ikitlisha inla adon da ya kwadoki kimaya jitabanada dot diki ya de gadit ahi atselestade de ya ko de gito paho Michelle Espino wal yo kwadonki jete hodolji.
Good evening, everyone. Michelle Espino, Yinsha, Tachitin Shle, Anatlana Bashichin, Sinajini Dashiche, Anatlana Dashanala, Natniljin de Nasha, and I am the Assistant Attorney General for the Navajo Nation Department of Justice's Water Rights Unit. I'm very happy to be here this evening to talk about the work that we've been doing over this past year to come to a settlement on our Arizona water rights. So thank you for having me this evening.
Hakoshila kodo yankima agatit ahi kodo ki inkiman lini eto branch kodo yankiche hatot seto da yankit coordinate di kodo ki ya yastki ke chel keden lidolit adon da bekel ne ke ya adegi ego da night dish kit no so ya adegi sadigitla kan de not trash adon da ade dotli kodo ya inkima inkiche hanana zi lidolit eto branch.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vice Chair Tooley. And I just want to give strong accolades to Vice Chair Tooley for his commitment. He's here every Wednesday at these radio forums, making sure that the public has access to this information, that you guys are all up to speed on our settlement in real time, essentially. So thank you so much, Vice Chair, for all that you do to move this forward, and to our chair of the Water Rights Commission as well for her commitment. They've really done an incredible job leading our Water Rights Commission. And of course to AAG Espino for her leadership. And this is not the only water rights settlement that she's working on right now. She's actually working on an amendment to the Navajo Gallup Water Supply Project Act, as well as moving forward a settlement relating to two basins in New Mexico, Rio San Jose and Rio Puerco, and is also negotiating our Zuni River Basin settlement that we expect will move later, perhaps next year. But she's going to have both the Arizona settlement and the Rio San Jose and Rio Puerco settlements moving at about the same time. So she's been very, very busy juggling lots of things. And then, of course, all of the members of our negotiation team, the speaker has provided incredible leadership in moving this effort forward. And of course, all of the delegates who are part of our negotiation team, we meet every Sunday. They put in a lot of time and effort and commitment, and I'm very thankful for their careful thinking and their guidance as we move forward in this process. It's a very complex settlement. It's one of the most complex legal tasks or challenges that I've ever taken on. And it has many, many parties, and we're going to share some more information about that with you as we get into this settlement discussion. So for those of you viewing this online, you can see our first slide. We're going to actually start out talking about the projects and the funds that will be coming out of this settlement, or that the settlement makes possible. First, I'm going to share with you this NTOA global water map for the nation. This is essentially the nation's vision for how we have to build out our water distribution system to have water security for the next 100 years and to be able to meet the demands of our people for the future. And so this is a very beautiful map. You can see water going to lots of homes. The black dots show the homes where there is no access to piped water at this time. So these pipelines that will go into this undertaking are going to bring water to homes that have never had running water before. And there are many, many of those homes, as you can see in this map. And actually, this next map gives you a sense for the regions of the nation where there is the greatest need for piped water. So the brown chapters in this map here are showing you the chapters where there are more than 200 homes that lack access to piped water. You can see a lot of that in the north. That's in Utah, as well as the upper basin of Arizona, including Kayenta, Shanto, Dennehotso, Oljeto, Navajo Mountain. And then also, surprisingly, Chinle falls into that same category, as well as Saline and wheat fields. We have my home chapter of Loop, and I did grow up without running water, and my family still doesn't have running water. We have Cameron in that category, Dilcon, Hawk, and then one chapter in New Mexico, Chichelta. Although I guess you could say Wheatfields extends into New Mexico as well. But that's quite a number of our communities where we have more than 200 homes that lack access to running water. So, you know, at the nation, I mean, this is really about human rights. It's about equity. It's about bringing our people into the 21st century and giving our people equal access to the same opportunities that other Americans have, whether that's the opportunity to just turn a valve to have access to water or to have access to water for economic development, for improved health outcomes. So it's very exciting to be at this moment where we're so close to a final settlement and the opportunity to have real water in Navajo people's homes. Michelle, did you want to mention anything about this map?
Well, this map is a map that we've used during our settlement talks to show the other parties what we're dealing with on the Navajo Nation. And as you know, that during the pandemic, you know, the pandemic and the results, the impacts on the Navajo Nation really shined a light on the Navajo Nation and our water needs. And so this map, it has been a great map to use to really tell that story as well. And unfortunately, you know, a lot of Americans were not aware that this was the situation on the Navajo Nation until the pandemic. So this has been really helpful for us.
Thank you for that, Michelle. And so this is another map that shows you what our water infrastructure looks like now. And in fact, not all of this infrastructure is built out, those purple lines. A lot of this is still currently under construction. And that dark gray line is really showing you the division between the upper basin and the lower basin for the Colorado River in Arizona. But the little blue lines are showing you water lines that should be going to homes. The purple shows you the larger infrastructure, like you can see the Navajo Gallup water supply pipeline, and you can see the Loop Dilcon pipeline that's mostly already been built, but still under construction. You can see the pipeline pulling water from Lake Powell and taking it to Lachute. So you can see that this is not a very well built out infrastructure base that we're starting with. And then what the settlement would make possible is what you're seeing in this next picture. It's really bringing that water from the northeastern portion of Arizona, connecting to pipelines at Sweetwater that are bringing water from New Mexico up to Utah. And it will bring that water down south to Rock Point, Lukachukai, Chinle, Mini Farms, Saline, And then additionally, you can see it would extend. For those of you who live in the Fort Defiance, Window Rock area, you see that pipeline, and you see it sitting there on the side of the road, and it stops right at the Arizona border. And that's because we don't have the right to run that water into Arizona. But this settlement would allow us to continue building that pipeline infrastructure all the way into Window Rock, Fort Defiance, Ganado, and eventually Lupton as well. So there's a lot you can see here in this map. You can see additional build out of the Loop Dilcon projects. You can see the Western Navajo pipeline being extended further south all the way down to Tuba City, and then all the way down to Cameron, and then further up north to Botaway Gap, and further north even than that. And the vision, what we've negotiated in the settlement is actually to continue that infrastructure into Hopi if they need that access in the future. So the settlement is making a lot possible, and I haven't touched on all of the projects, and so I'm going to give Michelle an opportunity to talk about that further if she'd like to. She's much more in the details here than I am. So
what I wanted to say about this map is that this map was not created overnight. This is work, hard work from our past, leaders, our current leaders, and also, our water rights commissioners, the attorneys before me, as well as our Department of Water Resources and NTUA. It's many, decades of hard work putting this plan together and this vision. And what we're hoping is that through the settlement, we'll actually finally be able to make these plans, this vision, a reality for the Navajo Nation, because it's much needed. And, everywhere around the United States, there are plans like this that have already, been put into place. And so now it's the Navajo Nation's turn to be able to have this type of water infrastructure developed on the Navajo Nation to serve the needs of the Navajo people across the Navajo Nation. So this is many years and many great minds and leadership, their hard work finally, being put out there and also hopefully to be made a reality. And I'm really excited. We've been working on the Navajo Gallup Water Supply Project for over a decade, and it's finally starting to serve different communities. And we've always wanted it to also serve the Arizona communities along the border. And we're also working with the Utah communities and the state of Utah as well. You'll see up there in the northeastern portion is that the lines are all connecting. And we are having to deal with, the 3 states that the Navajo Nation is spread across, and also the upper and the lower basin. So there's a lot of politics involved as well, and also collaboration and partnership. We're having to work with our state partners to make all of this a reality as well. So that's what I wanted to add to this map.
Thanks, Michelle. And, do you want to talk a little bit about those blue lines? Because just for our listeners, just so you know, in the United States, most municipal water comes from surface water. But on the nation, almost all of our water comes from groundwater for any purpose, really. And so, Michelle, do you want to talk about what those blue lines are?
Well, it's interesting that our maps and the maps that we're going to show later, it makes it look like we have a lot of water of the Navajo Nation because the color that was chosen was blue. But these are areas that are serving our communities mostly through groundwater, through wells. And also, there's a lot of communities that still haul water. So we still have, a lot of different water hauling stations, but we also, have NTUA that has provided a lot of this infrastructure that you see on the map to serve the different communities across the Navajo Nation.
Thanks, Michelle. And so this map goes into the actual projects that the settlement can make possible. And I think we should talk about the amount of the projects, and it's quite substantial what the nation needs in order to meet the demands of our population in 100 years. And so that's one of the things that as we move forward in this process, we're gonna learn more. When Congress looks at the price tag that we're talking about, billions of dollars of projects, and we just have to keep in mind that to date, the largest settlement that has been funded for an Indian tribe was $1.9 billion for Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes. And so, that's kind of the ceiling on what we've seen possible so far. So it is going to continue to be a challenge as we move forward through this process. Once we finalize the settlement draft, then we kick this to Congress, and then they're going to adjust things. But this is what we're putting on the table in our request. And whatever gets built out is going to get us a lot further to building out the infrastructure that we're going to need anyway, that we're going to have to build anyway if we want to be able to grow at our natural growth rate. If we're not able to grow at that rate, then we'll probably lose population because people will move elsewhere where it's easier to access water, and that we don't want to see that. In fact, we want to see the opposite of that. We want to see people returning to our homeland and contributing to our economy and our growth and our prosperity here at the nation. So Michelle, do you want to run through some of those projects?
Sure. I'd also like to touch on what you said about $1.9 billion being the current largest Indian water rights settlement. When that happened at the end of 2020, it really was a surprise to a lot of people that there was an Indian water settlement funded at that amount. But that's how much water development costs, especially nowadays. We do have the Navajo Gallup Water Supply Project that was originally appropriated at $800 million. And now we have legislation moving through Congress to make up for the cost overrun. That project is now in need of another $800 million to complete the project. And so we're looking at close to $2 billion to complete the Navajo Gallup Water Supply Project that was authorized and had appropriations set for it back in 2009. And so now the $1.9 billion, that's something that I think Congress is going to have to get used to for these Indian water rights settlements because of the cost of inflation, and the pandemic actually affected, the cost of construction of projects like this. And so we are looking, so the projects actually were valued through a process called value planning. And the Navajo Nation worked closely with the Bureau of Reclamation to come up with those amounts that are needed for these projects. And so what you're seeing on the map for the projects that we've been talking about, the projects that we are in need of, the total price tag that you see on this map is approximately $5 billion. And that is what's going to make these projects a reality. Is Congress going to fund this settlement at $5 billion? We certainly hope so. And that is our ask. And that is the amounts that came up through the value planning process. And that includes the rates of inflation as well. And so we're looking at the Four Corners project. You heard the Attorney General talk about how that will serve a lot of the communities in the central part of the Navajo Nation, from Sweetwater all the way down to Lukachkai, Chinle, and other communities. That Four Corners project, we're looking at being about $780 million to complete. We're also to the west, we have what we're calling the Western Pipeline Project, which is to be renamed because it's also going to serve other communities, including the Hopi community. And that project alone is $1.2 billion. But again, it's a very much needed project to serve the communities in the western part of the Navajo Nation.
Name the specific one?
Sure. The pipeline? Or the okay.
For the Western Navajo.
Can you name the name?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I will reveal, thank you, AG, that the name that was chosen by our negotiation team and all of those working on this project is the Inaba. Is it on here? Patuakatsi pipeline. And so since it's going to serve both the Navajo Nation and the Hopi tribe, we chose that it would be a Navajo word, a Navajo phrase, and also a Hopi phrase. So again, that name is Inaba Patuakatsi. And Inaba means for life, and Patuakatsi means water is life, and that's in the Hopi language. So other projects that will be part of the settlement is, as the AG had talked about, the Lupton Area Project. And the cost of that project is $195 million. And that is to develop and expand public water systems to deliver up to 5,000 acre-feet of alluvial aquifer and lower basin Colorado River water to Hawk, Lupton, Nahatsil, and Oak Springs. We also have the Kayenta Area Project, and that project will develop and expand public water systems to deliver up to close to 6,000 acre-feet of N aquifer and upper basin Colorado River water to Chilchinbato, Denahotso, and Kayenta. And the estimated cost for that project is $195 million. We also have the Four Corners project that I talked about, and that's actually going to deliver approximately 13,000 acre-feet of upper basin Colorado River water to Chinle, Mini Farms, Nazlini, Rock Point, Rough Rock, Round Rock, Sweetwater, Tisnasmos, and Saley, Wheatfields, Black Rock. And that, again, is going to be about $780 million. Another project that I really appreciate will be part of this settlement is the Navajo Agricultural Conservation Fund, and that'll help with, we've had a lot of people ask, how will the settlement serve, ranchers, farmers in the Navajo communities, and we wanted to ensure that there would be a project within the settlement. As well, let's see here. We have the local N aquifer and C aquifer projects, and they would develop and expand public water systems to deliver additional groundwater to Inscription House, Navajo Mountain, Coal Mine Mesa, Shanto, Tonalea, and other chapters, and that's an estimated cost of $300 million. We also have the Cold Talker lateral, and that will extend the water line and expand public water systems to deliver up to 9,000 acre-feet of groundwater, a little bit more than that, lower basin Colorado River water to Fort Defiance, Red Lake, St. Michael's, and Sawmill. And it will intertie the Ganado Area Project, and the estimated cost of that project is $390 million. And there are many more projects that will also be part of the settlement that will help serve the nation and the OMNR, which is the Operation Maintenance and Replacement Funds. That will be part of the settlement as well. We're hoping that will be funded because that helps keep the rates down for customers. And then there are also projects that will be for the Hopi tribe and the San Juan Southern Paiute tribe as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle. Were you able to get through all of the projects fully?
I wasn't. We still have
okay.
more.
Oh, yeah.
Go through
yeah,
more?
go through all of them so
Okay.
everyone can hear the projects for their communities.
Okay. So you heard me talk about the Western Navajo pipeline, the Inaba Patuakatsi. That is the pipeline that will divert water from Lake Powell to deliver up to 6,422 acre-feet of Colorado River Upper Basin and Lower Basin Colorado River water to Lachey, Kaibato, Coppermine, Botaway Gap, Tuba City, and Cameron, and up to 2,300 acre-feet to the Hopi Reservation. And the cost for that project is $1.7 billion. There's also the Southwest Navajo Regional Project, which it would extend the Loop Dilcon project to deliver up to 6,124 acre-feet of sea aquifer water to Loop, Bird Springs, Tulani Lake, Tisto, Dilcon, Indian Wells, White Cone, and Greasewood. And that cost for that project is $134 million. We also have the Ganado Area Project to develop and expand the water systems to deliver up to close to 6,000 acre-feet of sea aquifer and lower basin river water to Kintlachey, Ganado, Klagetoh, Cornfields, Wide Ruins, Jettato, and Steamboat. And that project will be approximately $250 million. And I think I did not cover this one, the Black Mesa Project. This will deliver up to 5,172 acre-feet a year of N aquifer water to Black Mesa, Forest Lake, Hard Rock, Low Mountain, Pinon, Blue Gap, Touchy, and Whippoorwill at the estimated cost of $193 million. And I believe, I want to make sure I got them all. I don't want to leave anyone out. Yep, I got them all. AG.
Great. So you can imagine, I am so excited about this settlement. I mean, I'm seeing the infrastructure go in for New Mexico. I'm seeing the water get to folks on the far east side through the Cutter Lateral. And I can tell you, as someone from far southwestern Navajo, I can't wait for water to get to my community. And there's so much that this makes possible in terms of the water access. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit more. And just as a reminder, here's that map of what we have now, essentially, right? We have these small groundwater projects in the blue on this map, and then we have the larger infrastructure projects that are either built or in process of being built in the purple lines here. And then this is what happens with the settlement in terms of really building out that infrastructure and getting homes online to water. And of course, you can see how far that would get us to building out our full necessary global water map to be able to meet the needs of our people in the next century. So super, super exciting. Michelle, I had this map up earlier, and I think you wanted to say something about that.
Well, I think I mentioned it in the other map, is that this has been, a lot of hard work to get to this point, a lot of planning, and again, over decades by many people from the Navajo Nation and also our partners, at NTOA and Bureau of Reclamation, and just the vision of our communities to serve all of the needs in the communities. So if you look at those black dots on the map, those are homes that without water. And so you'll see that our projects that we're trying to develop are to serve, all areas on the Navajo Nation. And
what I find super exciting about the settlement as well is that we've negotiated to be able to move upper basin water into the lower basin in Arizona and lower basin water into the upper basin. We've done everything we can to eliminate artificial lines.
to put it into underwater storage and do some replenishment of the aquifers and even further strengthen our water supply into the future. But we also are negotiating to have the ability to pull that water in the 3 states. Because you can see that Navajo Gallup water supply pipeline running along the 491 corridor. We want to be able to continue that infrastructure into Fort Defiance, Ganado, to run it down to Lupton. And so rather than having to pull that water from Lake Powell and bring it over to those communities, we want to just go ahead and continue adding to what we're pulling from the San Juan River and have that, be counted as part of our Colorado River water for use in Arizona. And so that's part of the flexibility that we've been negotiating for here in the settlement. And that's not something that we can get through litigation. We're going to talk about litigation in a little while, but none of this is possible with litigation. Number one, you're not going to have any funding. In fact, you're going to have millions of dollars of additional expense. You're not going to be able to move water across basins. What that means is, if we were left only with litigation, even if we were able to get an adjudication of our upper basin rights in Arizona, we wouldn't be able to use that water into the city because it's in the lower basin. It's only through an act of Congress that we can get that flexibility and that freedom to move the water where we need to move it in our Navajo communities in Arizona. And the same thing with the points of diversion. So those are some really incredible things that the settlement makes possible and that just isn't even on the table with respect to the litigation. So I'm going to hand things over to Michelle. I know she wants to talk about settlement versus litigation a little bit.
You can't see me in the studio, but I'm raising my hand. One thing I wanted to remind the listeners is that tonight's show is going to be mostly all in English. And next week, we're going to have another presentation very similar to this one, and it will be all in Navajo. So I know we're talking a lot of English, maybe, a lot of legalese. It's hard for us not to because we're trained lawyers and we're very passionate about this work that we are doing right now, because this is why we went to school. This is why we came back. And this is, why we're working on the settlement. So, but I just wanted to remind you that we will have this presentation again, all in Navajo, next week, and we will, continue to do our best to educate the public on the settlement. And what I wanted to say is, and I'm glad that the Attorney General brought it up, is that there are fabricated lines that we're having to deal with, state lines, and also the upper and lower basin. Those are all made up lines that the federal government created along with the states to regulate water, to have ownership over decision-making powers over our resources. And it hasn't been an easy task for the Navajo Nation to work around those state lines and also the upper basin and the lower basin lines. And the decisions that have been made without us for over a century when it comes to water. We're still dealing with that. But luckily, we have the support of leadership. We have educated individuals who are working hard to overcome those obstacles that we have been dealing with for over a century. And so as the AG said, when the Attorney General, as she said, it wouldn't be possible to have upper basin water go to the lower basin without the settlement and without taking it to Congress for congressional approval. And also, to even work across state lines. And what's been great for me in this job is the ability to be creative and to work with this great team of very knowledgeable professionals to be able to use our creativity to work with our state partners, our federal partners, our communities to get down to what is it we need and how are we going to actually make it happen. So that's what this, to me, that's what this global map represents. This is how we're going to make it happen. And instead of talking about it and worrying about the obstacles, we're just pushing ourselves through, those barriers to make it happen.
Yeah, it's really inspiring to be part of this team because everyone is so solution oriented and really focused on the end goal, which is this map, right? It's water for our people. It's a future for our people in our homeland. And so it's just been really awesome as we encounter challenges, and there have been challenges along the way. This has not been an easy process by any stretch of the imagination. I think you all know that, given how long it has taken for the nation to get to the point where we're this close to a settlement, and a settlement that has so much benefit as well. Like, we've never had this much upper basin water on the table, and the ability, and even the project vision is just incredible, and the opportunity to be able to bring this much funding to our community and this much in infrastructure to our community. And we have this really incredible moment with this president and this secretary, and before there's a change in guard, we're hoping to be able to lock in the settlement and get approval of Congress and make sure that we have the support that we need from the administration and from Congress to move this forward. It's all about water for our people, right? Here's a photo of Grand Falls, close to home for me, one of the most beautiful places in the whole world. It's about making sure that this water isn't just running through our communities, that this water stays in our communities and benefits our people and our livestock and our food, our plants, and really allows us to enrich our community here on the nation. And here's some photos of the reality of how many of our people live. A third of our community hauls water, and that's a hard life. There's so much that goes into that, coming from a ranching family and a water hauling family. My mom has to drive 20 miles one way just to get her water. And it's a lot of wear and tear on your vehicle. And it's mostly dirt roads for a lot of the folks who are doing agriculture in our community. It's a lot of hardship for mostly elders and children in our communities. So to have the opportunity to have access like other Americans do to just turning the water spout on and having that water immediately at our fingertips, that's the vision, that's the hope. And that's what we carry with us into those negotiation rooms, to make sure that we have real water for our people, and a real opportunity for the future. So we're going to go ahead and go a little bit into the nuts and bolts of the settlement summary at this time. So for those of you viewing this online, you can see this is what our negotiation room usually looks like. It's about maybe 15 people in the room. We meet at least 3 days a week, and we've been doing that since January. But we initiated meetings with Hopi pretty much in the spring and the summer. And then we were able to pull in all parties once we were feeling like we were getting close to some sort of settlement.
With all of the negativity of the pandemic and the adversity it brought to our community, it did elevate the issue and the disparity in terms of access to water for our community. And for the state of Arizona, it's like right here in their backyard, right? And so I think it really helped humanize the issue a lot more for the folks in the negotiation room. And then, of course, we were also just coming out of our Supreme Court oral arguments and receiving that decision, which you know, a lot of people had a view on whether that was positive or negative, but there were some really important victories for the nation in that litigation and in that opinion. And I think it really woke up some of the state parties to realize that this was not going to be a slam dunk for them to cut us out of access to Colorado River water. So I'm going to hand things over to Michelle to add to this.
Right. And I'm glad you brought up the Supreme Court case, but we also were just coming out of our phase 1 trial of the LCR adjudication, the Navajo Nation's phase 1 trial. And most of these individuals, if you're watching online, were our attorneys who were representing their clients in that adjudication. And it was a very, not just because it was in Phoenix, but it was a very hot summer because of the litigation. It was a very tough trial to get through, and that was just phase 1. Our phase 2 is scheduled for 2027. So if we don't reach a settlement, we will be going back to the courtroom to continue litigating just the little Colorado River claims for the Navajo Nation. But you know, it took some time to really get the negotiations moving forward. I think at this point in time, everybody does want a settlement. We seem to have full support from all of the parties, including the state and the U.S. government, to reach a settlement. And as the AG said, everyone did learn from the pandemic and how important it is for the Navajo Nation's water claims to get settled. So we can go ahead and move forward into the summary.
Okay, great. So again, a little background. Here's a wonderful map of the nation's water rights claims, and you can access this map on the Water Rights Commission's page. There's actually a lot of really great information on the Water Rights Commission's page. And again, I want to commend our commissioners, especially the chair and vice chair, for the hard work that they're putting into making sure that you have access to information about the nation's water rights at your fingertips through the web page. And so this map is on the web page, and it shows you the upper basin of the Colorado River in the 4 states, as well as the lower basin of the Colorado River. And within the lower basin of the Colorado River is the Little Colorado River Basin. And there's a black line kind of delineating that. So please, study that map and familiarize yourself with that so you can better understand. And here you can see, remember I was giving the example of getting upper basin water from Lake Powell. And if we're not able to bring that water to the lower basin, we're not going to be able to bring it down to Tuba City, which is well south of the upper basin line. So, there are still some communities that can receive that water. Kienta is one of our largest communities, and they would have access, but it would leave out a lot of communities that really need that water. And so we'll just kind of run through what we will be receiving through this proposed settlement. I mentioned earlier that this is the most upper basin Colorado River water the nation has ever had on the table. And it's substantial. It's 90% of the upper basin water in Arizona. And what this number, 44,700 acre feet per year, that includes all of the water that was being used at NGS. And then there's 50,000 acre feet per year in the upper basin in Arizona. And so 3,000 of that goes to Page, and we basically get everything that's left. We did carve out a small amount for Hopi Tribe just to make sure we could get them to the settlement table and get to final settlement on this matter. So that brought our number to 44,700. And again, that is some of the firmest water on the river in the state of Arizona, because that comes off of the top for the state of Arizona's Colorado River water. And then from there, it flows into the lower basin, and there's a priority system.
And I can go ahead and cover the lower the lower basin. We would also be receiving 2,000 acre feet a year of lower basin fourth priority water. The Hopi, or let's see, and also another, I'm sorry, 3,500 acre feet of lower basin fourth priority water for the Navajo Nation. And let's see, we also have, oh, there it is. Sorry, I didn't see the screen. I don't know what happened to my screen. Okay, sorry, AD.
Were you able to cover all of the LCR?
Yeah, yes, okay, I can do that. Good. Yeah, Little Colorado River, all of the LCR main stem water that reaches the Navajo Reservation. The historic LCR main stem flows, which are estimated to be 122,000 acre feet a year. And this includes quantified amounts and priority dates for specific historic Navajo irrigation projects, all LCR tributary water that reaches the Navajo Nation. And this the settlement would be grandfathering in existing uses.
So this map here shows you the scope of what we're litigating right now. So what we're litigating right now does not include the upper basin. That would have to be its own separate adjudication. And just so you have a sense for how long these things take, the Little Colorado River adjudication was initiated in 1978, and the nation filed its claim in 1985. And we're now, what is that, 40 years later, finally at a point where we're close to getting some kind of determination from the court with respect to the nation's rights in the LCR. So with the upper basin not even in a live adjudication at this point, we're looking at, once that is initiated, it could take 50 years. And good luck initiating it.
Right. There would definitely be a lot of difficulties in even initiating our claims in court. We did get, the go-ahead, I guess you could say, from the Supreme Court in our Arizona v. Navajo Nation case that, we're welcome to continue litigating. But again, that takes years. It takes millions, if not billions of dollars, a lot of time. And we're dealing with, laws and politics and policies that were made without inclusion of tribes. And so we, are hoping that, through settlement, we'll be able to avoid future litigation. Settlement will bring us this water soon, much sooner. And let me go ahead and continue on with with what's in our settlement. So again, lower Colorado River Basin, 3,600 acre feet a year of fourth priority lower basin Colorado River water. Could you go to the next slide? Okay. And then also the Navajo Aquifer, all that underlies the Navajo Reservation up to 8,400 acre feet a year. 2,000 acre feet a year may be used for industrial purposes. And what's been very important in this settlement in negotiating with the Hopi tribe is management and preservation of this very important aquifer to both tribes. And so we did agree upon a shared management plan with the Hopi tribe that we think is fair and manageable between the two tribes. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, AJ?
Yeah, I did want to add something.
We have had some questions at our public meetings about that 2,000 acre feet a year available for industrial purposes. That is not a mandate. That's not a requirement. That's actually a limitation on how much of the 8,400 acre feet a year of Navajo aquifer water that can be used for industrial purposes. It's just saying that if we want to, we can use up to 2,000 acre feet of that water for industrial purposes, but it's protecting the additional 6,400 from industrial use. And if we decide we don't want to use that for industrial use at all, then we don't have to. So I just wanted to be clear that that is not a requirement or a limitation that we have to use that for industrial purposes. It's just an option for the nation that sets a ceiling on how much of that water can be used for that purpose.
Okay, the sea aquifer, the Coconino aquifer, again, all that underlies the Navajo reservation, we would be allowed to draw from. There are, again, there's protections that we insisted in putting in place, and we're calling those buffer zones. Protected by use agreements, there are what we're calling site agreements with Hopi, Flagstaff, Bar T Bar Ranch, and the Arizona State Land Department. And this was something that our team felt very strongly about, is the need to ensure that there were buffer zones to protect the nation's water. You want to add to that, AG?
Yeah, for those of you
on the radio, you can't see the extensiveness or the expansiveness of the Coconino aquifer. It basically underlies all of the Four Corners region, and basically a quarter of Utah, maybe a third of Colorado, well, maybe a quarter of Colorado, a quarter of New Mexico, a quarter of Arizona. This is a huge aquifer. And we happen to be located, well, my backyard in Loop.
Dab in the middle of it.
My backyard in Loop is located at the top of the aquifer, and in one of the best places to access that water, where the highest quality Coconino aquifer water can be accessed. So we are very blessed with that resource. And so this is really meaningful to have the ability to utilize all that underlies the Navajo reservation. And that's why we were so insistent on having these protections with the buffer zones and the use agreements with the other parties in the region that make heavy use, that we anticipate may make heavy use of Coconino aquifer water in the same region where we will be pumping that water. So what we established for everyone essentially is buffer zone 1 and buffer zone 2. And buffer zone 1 is a 2-section band around the nation's southern and western reservation boundary. And that's is roughly equivalent to a 2-mile buffer. Each section is roughly a mile by a mile. And in that buffer zone 1, that will, again, we're grandfathering existing uses, but that will limit pumping to 35 gallons per minute, which will be small wells. Any new wells will be subject to our ability. We will preserve our ability to challenge those wells. There have been some questions in the public meetings about waivers. And so this is a limitation on the waiver and our preservation, what we call a retention on our inherent rights to be able to go in and challenge any of these wells that are above 35 GPM that cause injury to the nation's groundwater. So, and then in buffer zone 2, well, going back to buffer zone 1, that 2-mile buffer is extremely valuable to the nation. That's where we get the first 2-mile spacing between wells is where you get 70% of the protection on the quality and the quantity of your well. So having a 2-mile buffer all the way around the reservation means that we have 70% protection to all of our wells in the sea aquifer. And so that is super, super important. And then, but that was not enough for us. So we wanted to have additional protections above that 70%. So we negotiated for something called buffer zone 2. And that's an additional 4 sections from the nation's southern and western boundary. Those of you who can see this online, you can see that the buffer zones end kind of up above Cameron, and that is because we're not applying the buffer zones to National Park Service, for example, and that purple area would be the Grand Canyon. We also are not applying that to Forest Service and allottees as well. So this is very complex, and we're trying our best to simplify this. The settlement agreement is over 200 pages long. So just being able to distill everything to an 8-page settlement summary was very challenging. And we appreciate everyone's patience with us as we try to share as much as we can, but also in an understandable manner. And very soon, we hope we will have that full settlement agreement ready to share with the public. We are still fine-tuning the language, making sure that everything reads the way that we need it to read, the way that we want it to read, making sure that the things we've negotiated for are things that we can actually enforce. And so that takes a lot of careful work. And, you know, we're kind of balancing the reality of the legislative timeline that we need to work with, which we're kind of running behind on at this point, but also wanting to be careful because this is a really, really important agreement, and we don't want to have any mistakes in this document. And we want to make sure that all the parties fully understand what is being conveyed in the words in that document. And so that's just taking more time than we had hoped for. But we are continuing to move forward. We will continue to move forward. So that's the buffer zones. And then we also have, Michelle mentioned these special agreements with certain parties. One of those parties being Hopi Tribe. They own the Hart Ranch, which is immediately south of the Loop chapter, kind of between Meteor Crater exit and Twin Arrows. That's like my backyard. I used to ride my horse to Meteor Crater gas station to get ice cream during the summer because our ranch is just, like 5 miles north of that. So for those of you who know Interstate 40 and the exits near Twin Arrows, that will mean something to you. But this buffer it provides us a 1 mile buffer with respect to Hopi. And just, Hopi is different because they're another Indian nation, and we want to be respectful of tribal sovereignty. So we didn't ask the same thing of them that we asked of the non-Indian parties. So we have a 1 mile buffer with Hopi for that with that 35 GPM limit. And their line is a little jagged. It's because some of these parcels, these sections, they own in fee simple that they converted into trust. So they actually have jurisdiction over their trust lands in that region. But it's a checkerboard region with Arizona state land trust lands. And for those, they have a lease to use that land. And so for Hopi's parcels, it's just a 1 mile buffer. And I mentioned earlier that sections are not exactly 1 mile. And with the Arizona State Land Department, we do have, that longer, the full section covered. So, but anyway, in the aggregate with Hopi, we do have an aggregate pumping limit, and that is 6,570 acre feet per year that they can pump south of us. And this 1 mile buffer is still extremely meaningful because you guys can see on this map here, for those of you who can see it, you see this PW1A notation here. That's one of our wells, one of our existing wells. And that's actually more than a mile north of the reservation line. And you can see that Hopi's buffer adds an additional mile. So in fact, with respect to Hopi, we do have in fact a 2 mile buffer with them because our well is a mile north of our reservation line. So we felt adequately protected from Hopi with this agreement. And then we also have special agreements to protect the wells at Twin Arrows, and Hopi has a well there as well. And so we gave kind of reciprocal agreement with them. And then over here on the next map, this shows you our agreement with, All right, I was supposed to show the agreement with City of Flagstaff, but I can describe that agreement on this map here. So you can see right next to Hart Ranch, just a little bit east, is the Red Gap Ranch. And also another place where I used to play when I was little. We would help herd cattle on that ranch. And they have 13 wells at Red Gap Ranch. And they have ambitions. The reasons why the city of Flagstaff purchased that ranch was for access to sea aquifer water. And so for quite a while, they've had a vision for a regional water supply project. And so they want to be able to use those wells for that purpose. And so we have, we've tussled with them in the courts in the past, and we were able to enter into a stipulation agreement to protect the boundary of the nation and protect our wells from Flagstaff's wells. So you can see that's reflected in how Flagstaff's wells are mostly two sections or more south of us. And in this settlement agreement, they do have one that is closer than the 2-section line. And in this settlement, we were able to negotiate with them that they will not use that well. They will honor the 2-section buffer line. And we also put a pumping cap on them. We looked at, we want to be reasonable parties. So we did look at their 100-year water supply needs and demands. And so they're expecting to need at some point 12,000 acre feet per year. So we built that into the agreement that they will be able to pull that water for municipal purposes, but that's their limit in buffer zone 2.
I just want to add, that these protections are very important to the team that's been working on this. And it's through this settlement that we can make sure that we have these protections. If we were to continue through litigation, we might not have these, the assurance that these protections would be there. So again, this is another benefit for our settlement agreement.
Thanks for mentioning that, Michelle. And another really cool thing that we were able to get in our agreement with City of Flagstaff is the ability to actually use their water, the water from their wells, as a backup, emergency backup to our well system. So if we ever do experience impairment to our water in those wells south of Loop, we will be able to utilize up to 1,000 acre feet per year from Flagstaff's well system if their project is fully built out. And additionally, we can use that water wherever else we want to use it along their pipeline pathway, the most obvious place being Twin Arrows. The pipeline is going to run along Interstate 40 from the Meteor City exit all the way to Winona, and then it's going to follow Townsend-Winona Road into Flagstaff. So, it's running right by Twin Arrows, and we're excited about having access to that infrastructure if we ever need backup supply, or if we fully build out Twin Arrows and we need additional backup supply of water, or even just ongoing supply of water for the Twin Arrows community. Okay, this is some of photos from our negotiation session. Sometimes it can be, a difficult session. Sometimes folks are laughing and chatting, but I think everyone is bringing to the room a spirit of wanting to get this done. It's been out there for so long, and now that we've been, we all went down the litigation path, and we are seeing that is not our preferred pathway for all the reasons we've been explaining. And it's, people are war worn, I think, right? And like people have spent millions of dollars. In fact, I don't maybe even $500 million at this point among all the parties. There are 39 parties in the adjudication. And, everybody's sunk millions of dollars into this so far. And we're not anywhere near the end of this adjudication. So I think everyone's ready for certainty to access to water, and wants to be spending our money on infrastructure and water delivery and not litigation.
And you talked about almost spending $500 million. We're just talking about the Little Colorado River Basin adjudication. We're not talking about the Upper Basin or any other areas. So it's very costly to be in litigation, and it definitely has impacted the Navajo Nation as well.
And just to be clear, the Navajo Nation has not spent $500 million on this litigation. It is among the 39 parties.
Correct. We're
pretty sure that collectively everyone has spent $500 million, I would say, at this point. So just to recap, the key benefits of the settlement. Michelle, do you want to run through that, or you want me to run through that?
It will result in real water in Navajo people's homes, in our communities, a substantial actualization of the nation's vision for a global Navajo water supply system. We like that global map, and you'll see more of it. Water security from a dynamic and adaptive global Navajo water supply system. We'll have the ability to divert Arizona water in all 3 states. Will have the ability to move water across basins in Arizona. We will have access to the firmest Colorado River water in Arizona. And it's an opportunity for growth and opportunity on the Navajo Nation, a pathway home for our people. That's one thing that we've heard throughout, our journey in the settlement, is that people do want to come home. When we were preparing for our litigation and we were having individuals come to be witnesses to testify, we hear about how Navajo people want to come home, but we need to have water to do that. So insurance that we can remain in our homeland for time immemorial and thereafter forever.
I really wanted to use that language because when you guys do see the settlement, you'll see in our waiver section, when we do offer some of these waivers, it is for, it's for claims from time immemorial and thereafter forever. But what we're getting in exchange for that is the ability to have life in our homeland and to sustain our nation and our people from time immemorial and thereafter forever. So it runs both ways, right? Even though, and people ask about the waivers, they're asking, like, what are we giving up? Well, you can't get out of litigation unless you waive your right to litigate, right? You don't get the benefits of a settlement if you don't waive your right to litigation. And we do have substantial retentions in the agreement to protect the things that we've negotiated for as benefits to the nation. But ultimately, it's a compromise. And what we agree to is to put down our swords and to compromise and move forward together. And so that's what you're going to see reflected in the settlement agreement once it does get finalized and shared with the public. And we do have a sense for, we've said it a few times, that settlement is better than litigation. I firmly believe that at this point. And I'll be honest, when I was AG last time, I didn't realize that the way I realize it now. And that's when we were really gearing up our LCR adjudication, our claims in the LCR. And what we've seen, we've had the fortune of having a preview of what litigation can bring to the nation based on what happened in Hopi's claim in the adjudication. I'm going to let Michelle walk us through that.
Okay, sure. So the Hopi tribe had its trial, all of its phases of their trial. They were put on first, and then we were to follow up. So we do have a sense of what it could look like for us if we were to continue through with the Little Colorado River trial. The special master who oversaw the Hopi trial did issue last year its recommended decree to the state court, who will make that final decision in the Hopi tribe's trial. So you'll see in this chart, if you're looking online, that the Hopi had asked for in the middle column there, you'll see that those are the Hopi future claim. So, for example, for DCMI, they asked for 9,000 domestic, commercial, municipal, and industrial use. Light industrial use. That's what DCMI means. So for the Hopi tribe, they claimed that their future need is 9,322 acre feet of water. And the special master, after hearing all of the evidence presented by the Hopi tribe and by all of the other parties in the case, determined that the Hopi tribe does not need 9,322 acre feet a year, but instead is recommending that they only need 3,069 acre feet a year. That's 1/3 of what the Hopi tribe claims, and was supported by the evidence that they presented in court. And so if you go down the list, you'll see that the special master even found 0 for some of their claims. For example, the Hopi tribe had asked for livestock value chain operations and their alfalfa fields. They requested, or actually they claimed 12,215 acre feet, and the recommendation from the special master is 0. So this is a state court, and it does not look like, based off of what happened in the Hopi case, that they are supportive of the stories and of the claims from the tribes. So that is, of course, a concern and something that we have to take into account. We are continuing, to prepare for our trial in case settlement doesn't happen. And it's something that we are continuing to have hearings for. The LCR litigation is still moving forward. We've had hearings as recent as last week, and we are also scheduled for our phase 1 closing arguments for April. However, because we are in this settlement and we're reaching finalization, the parties, all of us, agreed to file a motion for a continuation of those closing arguments, hoping that we will reach settlement and we will not have to have those hearings. But again, if you look at the chart that's shown online, then you'll be able to see that the recommended decree for the Hopi tribe's claim only is 1/3 of what they claimed in the Little Colorado River adjudication.
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, that was certainly
Disappointing.
Very disappointing, deeply disappointing. And a big part of why, that trial, the adjudication, is us trying to establish, like, this is our historic use. Here's our existing use. And as you guys all know, we don't, because it's so difficult for our community to access water, we don't use as much water as other communities, and we're not, fully built out or fully grown in terms of our economic development because of the lack of access to water. And so, it was very difficult to assert those things, and of course we try to argue and say that we're not at our natural growth level because of the lack of access. But when you're working with a judge, they're just looking at like what's actually there, right? Mm-hmm. And then, of course, there's also the future claim as well. And then we're relying on statistics like the census data, which historically undercounts Native American communities, especially Navajo Nation. And especially the last census happened during the pandemic, and people did not want to open their doors. And so that really suppressed our numbers. And so, that's one of the other things we have to keep in mind in the litigation context. And then let's see if I can, there we go. Okay. Michelle, did you want to add anything? This was just a photo from our Supreme Court oral argument. Process and timeline. Very quickly. Michelle, do you want to run us through the process? I will say it's 7:30 now, and we want to do 30 minutes of questions. But if you want to just run through this really quickly.
Sure. So right now we are at the first box. We're finalizing our settlement. I know that we had given a projected date that was much earlier than today. We wish that we were able to stay on that timeline because we know that our timeline to get this to Congress and approved by the end of this year is a short window. So we're at finalizing our settlement. And then the next step is to take it to the Navajo Nation Council for approval. There will be a 5-day comment period, and we encourage individuals to please submit your comments on the settlement. And then once council approves it, if they do, then it will go to the president for his signature. And then it will be submitted to our congressional delegation to submit to Congress for congressional authorization. Once it's authorized, then it would come back to the parties, and if there were any changes made by Congress, and that's more than likely to happen, that we saw that happen in the Navajo-Utah settlement, we saw it happen in the New Mexico settlement, is that Congress is another body that we're going to have to work with to approve the settlement as agreed upon. But they have their say as well, and they also have, the ties to the funding that we're hoping to get. And so once they approve the settlement, then we have to go back and conform the settlement to what Congress approved. And that does take some time. And then it will have to go back to the courts, to the adjudication to be finalized. In the Utah settlement, we're still in that phase. We did finish the conformance, but we are still waiting for the final adjudication. And sometimes that takes time. In fact, in New Mexico, that just occurred within the last couple of years, even though Congress approved our settlement in 2009. Next slide. I'll go ahead and cover this one. So after the Arizona v. Navajo Nation case, after the decision was made by the Supreme Court, our Honorable Speaker, Crystalline Curley, was asked to testify. And what was great about that hearing is Congress heard the court say, that some of these decisions and actions have to be made by Congress. And so they invited the Navajo Nation to testify in response to the Supreme Court decision. And they asked, what can we do? What does Congress need to do to address the situation on the Navajo Nation? And I thought that Speaker Curley did an excellent job representing the Navajo Nation. And one of the points that she made is you need to support settlement of the Navajo Nation's water claims so that we can build the much needed water infrastructure on the Navajo Nation.
So I just want to emphasize, we are working with a narrow window of opportunity. We are trying to get this legislation through this Congress. We are facing an election season, a possible change in administration. Every Congress we've seen in the last few elections has become progressively more conservative. And less likely to want to spend money on anything, much less an Indian water settlement. Our LTR adjudication is continuing to move forward. And even if we don't come to a settlement, there will be an outcome to that adjudication. And based on, what happened at Hopi, we don't expect that to be a generous outcome for the nation. And then there's just the reality on the river as well, that hydrologically, water is disappearing in the Colorado River Basin. And we're seeing that in the news, and we're seeing that in the actions of policymakers. So we want to make sure that we lock in our enforceable rights to that water before it's just kind of written off the books. So really important narrow opportunity. And this just showing you guys that over time, the demand in the region is way higher than the supply.
And I just want to add that we're dealing with the hydrology, we're dealing with a climate change, we're dealing with what people are calling a mega drought. Back in 2010, 2012, the nation and the states, they knew that we were dealing with a drought that was going to impact the region in such a way that we would need to start conserving. But I don't think they realize how, or we know now that they didn't realize how much of an impact it would be. It's much worse than what they actually thought. So that's why we're seeing, water dwindling, in the Colorado River. And so hydrology is a really important thing to take into account at this time.
Great. We wanted to share with you guys some information about our public education sessions. The in-person sessions typically run much longer. You can go to the Water Rights Commission's Facebook page. You can go to their website and you'll find that information. We've had really great attendance, really great questions. Of course, we've had our radio forums. And so back to our radio forum. And a big purpose of the radio forum and the in-person meetings is to answer your questions. And we want to make sure we make time for that. So Michelle, I know you have a trusty list of questions that you can run through for us.
Okay, so we have like 27 minutes left, and we're going to go ahead and try. We know that the information we've been providing is a lot, and but we don't want to avoid not answering some of these questions. We've had some great questions come out of these events and the radio forum. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to ask the Attorney General the first question. Let's see here. I think we answered some of them. One of them was about the timeline for the agreement and legislation, and we just went through that. We're looking to try to have Congress approved by the end of the year. But AJ, how is this settlement different from the 2012 settlement?
The 2012 settlement was primarily focused on the LCR. So that's one major way. This is a comprehensive settlement to the nation's water claims in the state of Arizona. So it's including our upper basin claim, our lower basin claim, in addition to the LCR sub-basin claim, and then also our Gila River Basin claims as well. So that's one major way that it's distinct. It offers the opportunity to bring a lot more Colorado River water to our communities, as well as much firmer Colorado River water. A lot of the water in the lower basin, all of the water in the lower basin operates on a priority system. And in the past, we've been talking about, water that isn't even there anymore, that it has been written off of the books. So, the upper basin water coming right off the top is so important and gives us so much more assurance into the future in terms of the nation's access to water supply.
Okay, I'm going to ask you another one, and then I'll let you ask me. Water rights adjudication and settlement talks have been going on for decades. Why should we believe it's going to happen this time?
I think we went through that
earlier. It seems like people are ready. The parties are ready to have a settlement. We would much rather talk about spending money on projects rather than litigation. And I think there's also a stronger sense, especially with the larger hydrological and climate conditions that we live in, a stronger sense of a shared plight along the river. And so we're all wanting to have greater certainty with respect to water access for the non-Indian communities, in addition, of course, to the Navajo Nation. So I think that is really bringing us to the table. The Supreme Court opinion was very sobering to the states as much as it was to the nation. And, so I think that we just want to focus our energy on something constructive at this point, and getting water to communities, especially coming out of the pandemic, understanding what kind of a quandary that is, and what an impact on human life that can have. I think people are ready, not just in Arizona, but in the United States. I think the American people are ready to see the Navajo people have access to water.
Okay, so settlement means money, funding, but it's not always enough or promised. People are wondering about funding running out for projects, and projects going uncompleted for years. How will this settlement address that?
Sure. Well, settlements are slow processes. Even litigation in the water context is very slow, as we've explained. It can take 50 years for you to get a result in litigation relating to water rights. And even with our water settlements, Michelle mentioned earlier the Navajo Gallup, the San Juan River settlement, and how long it's taking, because it takes time. You have to study and understand what you're trying to build, how much that's going to cost. And then you have to actually hire people to do the work. You have to go buy the items you need to build out the project. And then there's the actual building of the project itself, and then getting the water to come through the system, making sure it's safe, and all of those things. And this just takes time. And thankfully, the nation has been very industrious. We've had really great visionary leaders at all levels when it comes to water, whether that's in the Water Resources Department or the Water Rights Unit at the Department of Justice, the Water Rights Commission, on the council, our former presidents, and they have just moved forward even without settlement funding. Earlier, we talked about how the Western Navajo Pipeline has already been started. There's already water running through those pipes, serving families in Lachee from Lake Powell. We're Navajo. We don't just sit back and wait around for things to happen. We get things done, right? And we don't wait for permission to do that. And so we've really taken that ethic to our water development here at Navajo Nation. And so things are moving. So, this settlement is just going to be this huge infusion of resources in a process that's already underway. And that has really helped us in the settlement negotiations to already have value planning numbers, so that we knew going in approximately how much these projects would cost. And it was a matter of just months to update those numbers for inflation and, marking the values to current dollars. We're going to be moving pretty quickly compared to any other settlement. Once we have access to funding, we're going to be able to build pretty quickly. But these are monumental projects. These are huge projects that you don't typically see in an Indian water settlement, or even just in this country. Because the region that we're serving is so vast. and the volumes of water that we are planning to move are so tremendous. So it will take time. It's not going to be overnight. And we just all need to be patient and just be, to me, as long as we're moving forward in the right direction, and it's happening, and we're seeing things fall into place, even with the settlement, the work that's been done leading up to where we are, and that's brought us to this position where we could move negotiations so quickly.
Right, and I'm glad you brought up the value planning. That's something that's been ongoing, and it was something that was done in the past when we were in settlement negotiations, and we were able to take that document and work with the Bureau of Reclamation to update those numbers, and the numbers have increased. As I said, we do have inflation to take into account, but luckily, because we had the plan, been working on the plan for a while, had those prior negotiations, we were able to take that the value planning study and update it with the help of our partners at BOR. AG, these we were handed, all of the questions. Our PR, our public education team has been out there in the communities, and they've been hearing the concerns and the different questions from our community members. And so we have pages and pages of really great questions here. So I'll give you a turn to ask me a question.
Sure.
One of the questions is, what does firmest water mean when we're talking about that upper basin water?
Well, as you had mentioned earlier, AG, the Colorado River right now is considered to be the best water in our region. And back in 1922, there was what we call the Colorado River Compact. And that's where the states gathered, the base, what we call the basin states gathered, and they made decisions on how to divide up the water from the Colorado River basins. And during that time, unfortunately, tribes were not included in those discussions, but they were included, meaning they weren't present in the discussions, but there were talks about the tribes in the discussions at some point, is what we're told. However, through the allocation, not just the compact meetings, but cases that followed, other important litigation, there was an allocation made to the state of Arizona of 50,000 acre feet for Arizona of upper basin water. And the other basin states have allocations as well. However, the 50,000 for Arizona comes right off the top. And so we do believe that is the firmest water, meaning that it will, any water that we're appropriated when it's firm, it's basically like a guarantee that water will be delivered at the amount in which it is firmed. But we do believe that the allocation that we would receive through this settlement is what we're calling the firmest water on the river.
Yeah,
and so that 50,000 gets taken off of the quantity, and then a percentage is allocated to the other states who are in the upper basin. So that's why it's called the firmest water, because as Michelle mentioned, that number never changes. Whereas with a percentage model, the number changes based on what's available. And then Michelle, one of the questions is, are we losing water because of lack of water development?
I would say that the word losing, when we're preparing for litigation, or even having to have the information, the data to support our claims, even in settlement, water development is definitely helpful. If we can show our use of water, it helps support our claims. And as we talked about earlier, the Navajo Nation compared to people living in the valley in Phoenix, our water use is very, very different. And so we are competing with them in a way, because when we're in court, the other parties show the Navajo Nation doesn't need as much water as they're claiming because look at their use. And we know that our use is low as a result of the fact that we do not have water infrastructure developed in order to be able to use the water that we rightfully feel, should be available for the Navajo Nation. And so water infrastructure development is so important. And also, the way that the policy and even the laws and outcomes of litigation is that they look at the use, and they you may have heard of standards like minimal use, or what is the data out there to show what a tribe would need. And because everyone's competing over water, especially in this region. So it is very important. And in our litigation, we not only show what we use, but we also show what we could use. And we also show that, our Navajo people want to thrive just like any other community in the United States. And so we do need that infrastructure to be able to really show a good story for the Navajo Nation to continue.
Great, thanks, Michelle. Another question is, what does
fourth priority water mean?
Fourth priority water. So in Arizona, there are first priority, second priority, third priority. It goes on and on. There are different levels of priority.
That's just lower basin.
Right, lower basin. There are different levels of priority, and it's just getting in line first in line, or what's the term? First
in time.
First
and right.
Right, first and right. So it's basically that is that you if you a third priority has more access, or has more. So I'm getting twisted in my words. I'm sorry.
So basically, the way it works is someone
who has a first priority, right?
Yes.
They're basically the first people to get to go to the well to fill up their cup. And then the second priority, like they get to go next. And
yeah, and where this counts is if there's a shortage. And so if there's a shortage, then the last in line is the last in line. The first in line gets priority over the second, third, fourth, and so on.
Yeah.
Great. And then let's see, we do have some live questions here. Let's see. Okay. We've gone through litigation. Let's see. Then we have some questions about water quality. Those are more basic questions about water in general. So I want to go ahead and keep focused on the settlement itself. But here's an interesting question. Does Navajo currently have the right to start building more water catchment systems before the settlement or litigation is completed?
Well, I don't know the answer to that.
Well,
other than we could continue to utilize and meet our water needs through different projects. And I know our Department of Water Resources continues to do that. Did you have another answer for that?
Yeah. Well, it
kind of depends. Yeah, I think you're right, Michelle, that right now there isn't really a limitation on that, if I understand what is meant by water catchment. So I'm imagining that's, talking about the flow through washes and efforts to keep water on the nation and restore aquifers, things of that nature. But once there is a decree out of the litigation, we're going to be limited in what we will be able to stop from flowing off of the reservation. And that's the way I describe litigation versus settlement is, in litigation, you're at the table with an empty pan, and you're having to argue your way, you're having to justify your slice of pie, right? And it's only going to be as big as you can prove it should be, based on actual data and historical evidence. And the data can be used to project what your future needs are going to be, but you're starting from nothing. And then with a settlement, you have the whole pie in front of you. And then you're talking to the people around the table and discussing who's going to get what slice, how big their slice is going to be. And so when we're talking about water catchment in the litigation context, right now a decision hasn't been made. But once that decision has been made and there's a decree, it's going to be based on what we've been able to prove in terms of our historic, existing, and future use. And so that's going to create limitations on us, pretty strong limitations. And whereas with settlement, it's going to be more like, well, how do we manage this together with Hopi? And that's part of our settlement is a joint management plan for the washes. And essentially, that is that we're not going to build catchments or structures that impede the flow to each other. And if we want to build those catchments, we're going to consult with each other, and there will be an opportunity to discuss and come to an agreement on whether or not something can be built if you're trying to build upstream of the other tribe. But once that water from the washes leaves the Hopi reservation and it's just Navajo reservation south of it, then we can do whatever we want with that water at that point. And so that's an example of just kind of divvying things up in a settlement versus in an adjudication. And you're just getting a decree on what you've been able to prove, and not saying like, well, you can only hold back this many acre feet, and everything else has to flow into the LCR and eventually into the Colorado River.
Here's one question that's online, and you just kind of hit on it as well. But it talks about what is the risk of litigation. And then what is the worst case scenario? We've talked about this in our team conversations and so forth. You want to?
Yeah, well, we've done that in executive session.
And, we don't want to, we have to walk a fine line of sharing information with the public, but we also don't want to completely, open our books. And because people are listening right now, not just Navajo people, there's probably folks from SRP, LCR Coalition, the state of Arizona, listening to what we're saying right now, and listening to all of the meetings where we're talking about water. So we want to be careful that we're not sharing something that can be used against us later in litigation. And part of that is also, we don't want to reveal our strategy or our assessment. And I think, we will have that opportunity to have that more frank conversation with the public once there is a final decree, whether that's coming out of the adjudication or the settlement. So I think we're going to hand things back to Vice Chair at this time, but thank you everyone for your wonderful questions, and hopefully you feel like your questions were being answered.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. This has been an enlightening evening as far as the conversation is. And I know that there's a number of folks that are out there. Navajos are spiritual people. Our forefathers had gone up into the high mountains and basically made offerings of white shell, turquoise, abalone, and jet to call forth the rains and other good things for the survival of our people. And thereby, we would like to ask the population and then also the faith-based groups that are out there, how can you help Navajo? Those that are Navajos and those that are Navajos at heart, we encourage you to make offerings, and we encourage you to make prayers on behalf of the settlement so that we can be able to benefit from the various activities that we can enjoy as far as having water. And then also the other aspect of this is that for those of you that are abroad, one day you're going to be coming home, and we want to be prepared for your welcome home so that you may be able to live with your families and having all the infrastructures in place, and then also, or even having the opportunity to have you cooperate with your various communities and building out your farmland and building out your herd, building out your livestock, and then enjoying the many blessings that we have here on the Navajo Nation. This is an opportunity for Navajo to put its best moccasin forward, to be able to work in unison. We are thankful for the Office of the President, the 25th Navajo Nation Council, and the Justice Department.